some important developments during the day today, JB and folks at home. The trend has been back east. If you remember yesterday, if you were paying attention, and I'm sure you were, all the models had trended west towards the Panhandle. Now the models have trended back east, a lot of them at least, back towards the Tampa Bay area. And even if this isn't a direct hit directly into Tampa Bay, and it just stays, 30, 50 miles offshore, we still would see very significant storm surge and significant impact. So let's go through some of the maps for you, and we'll hit everything that we can. First of all, winds are up to 60 miles an hour now. Just last update, winds were 45, now 60. The pressure is dropping rapidly. So this is all of a sudden getting its act together. What it did today was kind of laid the groundwork, kind of like building a house. It put the beams up, right? It put the structure up. So the organization was definitely put into commission during the day today. And now the thunderstorms are building on that organization. And you can see that big blow up of thunderstorms right near the center right there, which is why the pressure is dropping rapidly. It's moving northwest at around 12 miles an hour. Now, here's the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. And it's going to move northwest and then take more of a turn to the north. Notice how quickly it becomes a Cat 1, a Cat 2, and eventually a Cat 3. And it only goes over a very small portion of Cuba. So Cuba is not likely to do much of anything to weaken this system. It'll emerge into the very warm waters of the southern Gulf after moving through some of the really hot waters of the Northwest Caribbean. And by Tuesday at 2 p.m., it's forecast to be a major hurricane. A major hurricane is a Cat 3, Cat 4, or Cat 5. Here's the official forecast track once it gets into the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. It does get to Category 4 status. Now, do notice that happens Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, and then by Wednesday afternoon, National Hurricane Center weakens it to a Cat 3 off the west coast of Florida. Reason why they are weakening it is because it does run into wind shear. So that's kind of a little bit of a saving grace here, is that there's going to be some pretty decent wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico from about Tampa northward. Here is the latest track from the National Hurricane Center as it heads further north towards the Big Bend area. It's a Big Bend area. Of course, it's the Tampa Bay area right here. We are squarely in the cone, and this has been shifted further east, closer to Cedar Key. If you remember earlier today, it was right over here, and then it's been shifted further to the east, which makes sense, lines up with the new computer data. And by the way, I think the 11 o'clock track will probably be further east. I think they're going to shift it east, but we'll see what happens. You never know exactly, but it wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to the Cedar Key area, which would put the Nature Coast right near the center of the storm and force a lot of the storm surge on shore on the Nature Coast, but also into Pinellas County and parts of Tampa Bay as well. All right, so let's show you the model comparison. Now, if you've been following this, you know exactly which model has been in which camp. The European model has been further east, and it still is. The American model has been further west, but last run, it was back here. Now it's considerably further east than the latest model run. Notice the European is still exactly where it's been for days. Very consistent model for a few days. And when you have consistency in a model, it does lend some credence to it. You give it a little bit more confidence. But there's the American model, and it's really not that far offshore. Here we are Thursday at around noon. The European model has already moved directly into the Tampa Bay area. And the American model is just about 70-ish miles to the west of that. And what the European model and the American model do is they then kind of slow it down a little bit and then move it directly north. Both models move directly north. So the American model is close enough now to bring hurricane force gusts to the coastline of places like Pinellas County. So it is close enough now to deliver a pretty strong blow, if it does in fact move that close. One of the reasons we expect rapid intensification, National Hurricane Center forecasting that it could increase its winds by 40 miles an hour plus in a matter of 24 hours, is because it's going to be moving over extremely warm water in the northwestern Caribbean and the southern Gulf. We call this ocean heat content, and there's nowhere else on our side of the world where it is as hot as it is in the northwest Caribbean and the southern Gulf right near the loop current. You can see it right there. Here are the latest spaghetti plots, and you'll notice that there are, especially these right here, you can see the orange ones. That's the consensus of the models. So even though you see a bunch of models here, there are more models that are not on this plot right here. Like, for instance, the European Center for Forecasting doesn't actually allow their line to be on this. But when you factor it in, it pushes the consensus further east. So that is the consensus now right near the coast of the Tampa Bay area. So I want to show you the shift from yesterday to today. I'll step out of the picture for a second. So this is the super ensemble. So it's basically just about every model that we can put our hands on. And where you see the yellow colors, that's the heat map. So the heat map showing where most of the models are. And yesterday, most of the models were at least a few hundred miles to the west of the West Coast, a few hundred miles to the west of Tampa Bay area. Today, the consensus of the models are not much further west. They're very close to the coast. So there's been a pretty significant shift to the east. Now, it doesn't mean it can't shift back. Remember, we've shifted. We've done this windshield wiper shift back and forth several times already over the past couple of days. And there's no reason why it can't shift back again. So there's no reason for us to ride this emotional roller coaster. The best thing we can do is just make sure we're prepared. We have everything we need to have in our hurricane safety kit. We've gone over the plan with our family so that we're ready just in case evacuations are ordered. And it's conceivable that it could happen. Let me show you one of the reasons why. Take a look right here at what the simulated satellite is forecast to look like by one of our computer models by Wednesday afternoon. The clear, crisp eye. Clearly, this is a classic hurricane if it does evolve into this. And it really does look like a monster sitting off of our coast. So even if it were to do this, and some of the computer models are showing this, it kind of like parallels the coast and doesn't move inland. Some show it moving inland. But even if it does that, it's still going to throw a lot of storm surge into our area. Part of the reason is because the wave heights are going to be so big. And part of the reason is because of the forward motion of the counterclockwise flow. And on the eastern side, it kind of shoves the water towards our coast. And we have a very shallow slope. Anybody who's been out on a boat around here knows that you go 30 miles offshore and you're still in 80 feet of water. You go, 15, 20 miles offshore and you're still in 60 feet of water. So take a look right there. The pink and the purple indicating 40-plus foot waves just off of our coast. And obviously, they don't come on shore that large. They break up as they move on shore. But let me show you what I'm most concerned about here. Because even if, and this is the American model right here, even if the storm is far off the coast, watch as we kind of dive down. With this counterclockwise flow, it shoves that water into shallow water, and it's got nowhere to go but up. And of course, with this wind out of the southwest or west, it pushes the water right into Tampa Bay. And so you end up with water that's being shoved into a very small space. And it has nowhere to go but up. It gets pushed into the nooks and crannies, and you could end up with significant storm surge even if you don't have a direct hit in the Tampa Bay area. So that is what we're most concerned about. All right, with that said, I know we have a lot of questions to get to. There are more maps I can show you, and I'll get through them. But in the meantime, I'm going to toss it back to JB. I'm going to walk back to the desk so I can start answering your questions.
We do have a lot of questions coming in, folks, out of the Facebook Live comment section. For those of you who have been with us here before and tracking the tropics, you know how it works. Use hashtag HeyJeff or hashtag HeyJB with your comment, and we'll animate them on screen. It's as simple as that. And we're going to start in our Facebook Live comment section with getting some very important information out. Valentina, hashtag HeyJB, school closings. Heard some schools are closed already until Friday. My kids' schools have not had that notification. And Hillsborough schools, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday have been canceled. Now, Pinellas schools, still, there's some school cancellations. Go to WFLA.com, the WFLA app. We will post all school closings and additional closings. You're probably going to want to know about our airports. So many questions that come in about our airports.
Right.
All closures and cancellations on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. Let's get to this question from Dawn, hashtag HeyJB. How far east? Watching from Spring Hill. I have kids in Land O'Lakes, so talking here about Pasco County. So we've been talking here, and Jeff, you've been illustrating quite clearly about this this nudging east with what we have with the model data. How far east people really want to know.
Yeah, of course they do. Well, one thing I can say is there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, as the storm moves close to the coast, it is likely to weaken. Now, we haven't seen that with a lot of hurricanes in the Gulf over the past several years. A lot of them have rapidly intensified as they reach land. But there's good reason to believe, because of wind shear in the atmosphere, that we are going to see weakening. In fact, I can actually advance to show you the wind shear so you can get an idea of, there it is right there. So there's no wind shear over the storm right now. Then it moves northward, still no wind shear until it gets into the southeast Gulf wind. Look at all that red. It runs into wind shear. So watch, the National Hurricane Center weakens the storm from a 4 to a 2 over the course of about 24 to 36 hours. That's a lot of weakening in a very short period of time. So the answer to your question is, what's good about it is weakening storms, they generally can't force their wind very far inland. Yes, you'll have power outages. Yes, you'll have trees down, but it'll be nothing compared to the wind at the beach because weakening storms can't carry that momentum as far inland. So if you're inland, yes, this would be the kind of threat where, yes, there'd be trees down, power lines down. If you're not in a solid structured home, you might want to think about, if this moves in this direction, finding a home that's more solid for you to go to, a shelter. But again, we're more concerned right now about the coast. Inland impacts would be isolated tornadoes, which we are going to see on the eastern side of the storm. We're likely to see, I'd say, 10 inches plus of rain in I think, a number of areas. But wind, a lot more concerned about what happens on the coast. And I'll tell you, it's because just simply, you can see it on the computer models too, because I've been looking at some of them, where the wind is really strong close to the coast, and then it dies out quickly as you head further inland.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming in.
I'll try to be less verbose next.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We want
answer.
thorough explanations, of course. Hashtag Hey Jeff, hashtag Hey JB. That's the way that we pluck the comments. And that when I'm looking this way, it's because I'm looking at a screen here in your stream center, looking at, of course, your questions and comments coming in. Some breaking news just in seconds ago. USF, the University of South Florida, canceling classes Monday through Thursday due to Tropical Storm Ian, what will be Hurricane Ian. And as we get to that notion here, let's get to this comment. Elaine wants to know, hashtag Hey Jeff. So it's not a Cat 1
That's true.
yet. Is there a chance we have a Cat 1 in
By
this
morning.
11 o'clock
I think
update?
so. No, I don't think it'll be at 11 o'clock. I think it'll be by morning. But I say that because, and I say that with confidence because I can't believe how much the pressure has dropped just over the past several hours. So today it's been putting together. It's like I described it before, like building a house. You got to build the foundation. You got to put up the beams. And once you have that up, you can slap everything else on. That's what the storm's been doing today. It's been putting up its infrastructure, if you will, organizing. And now we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And unfortunately, it's rapid decrease in pressure, and it's going to be rapid intensification. National Hurricane Center said it earlier today in their headline. They said rapid intensification expected tonight, and boy, did they have it right. It's starting to happen right now, and there's no reason that it wouldn't be happening. We have extremely warm water temperatures, the warmest pretty much anywhere near us, and low wind shear, and unfortunately, all the ingredients are there for a very, very intense storm.
We are getting some fascinating questions and comments about the Euro and the GFS that we will get to in just a moment.
Okay.
I want to talk about the GFS and the Euro, but let's get to Thomas's question first. Hashtag HJB. Will this spawn a lot of tornadoes?
It's a good question. Every storm is different. Some storms produce a lot of tornadoes, other ones don't. It's too hard to know the answer to that question. It will produce some tornadoes. And the place where it's going to produce the most tornadoes, the eastern side, the dirty side of the storm. We are going to be on that side of the storm. So we are going to be on the tornadic side of the storm most likely. Of course, things could change. It could still shift. And we're not here to, and I just want to emphasize, we're not here to scare anyone. I just want everybody to understand, that there is a lot of potential here for significant damage and I would say also inconvenience. Because it's not just getting through the storm, right? It's not just sheltering in place, making sure you're away from windows, staying inside until the storm passes. It's what you have to deal with afterwards. Power outages, trees in the road, difficulty getting places. I just want everybody to be prepared for that. So this is not to scare anyone. It's just to say, let's be realistic about this and let's make sure we are prepared for what could be kind of an extended inconvenience and possibly worse than that. Okay.
It's important to stay weather aware with what we're talking about here. Let's get to Richard. Hashtag HF. What are we talking about wind speed wise for the Bay Area?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I will be honest with you and tell you what I saw so far today. So the European model, which is bringing the storm onshore directly into Pinellas County, let's say, and the Tampa Bay area, it brings those strong winds, especially into Pinellas County, and it brings gusts over 90, close to 100 miles an hour or so. Just west of that, even higher over the water. Winds tend to drop rapidly as soon as they hit land and friction, which is good news. But even the American model, which shows the storm fairly far offshore, does show hurricane force wind gusts along the coast of Pinellas County as well. So of course it depends on where you live, but it's not inconceivable that if we see a near direct hit or a direct hit, that we're going to see those gusts over 100 miles an hour.
One more
It's a big if, though.
One more question before we get to the GFS and the Euro, and I know that there's a lot of folks that want to hear more about the GFS and the Euro because those are two such important models that we follow here when it comes to forecasting tropical development. I want to address, there's so many commenters, of course, and this is with every stream that we do, people asking about specific, municipalities, Land O'Lakes, Sarasota, wanting to know about Venice, wanting to know about Tampa, wanting to know about Gainesville, Jacksonville, Miami, Pensacola, Destin. I can go on and on and on. But the number one that I'm seeing in this stream, which I find fascinating, and I don't know why, if we just have a lot of viewers joining us from Lakeland tonight, right in the middle of Polk County. And for those of you joining us outside the viewing area, Lakeland, really kind of the middle spot between Tampa and Orlando. Moreno wants to know, what's up? What do we say about Lakeland, Florida?
It's a good question, and I think we're probably seeing this partly because Charlie went through Polk County and was very destructive. And of course, Irma was very destructive also in Polk County. It's interesting because Pinellas County and Hillsborough County have been spared some of the biggest storms lately. But it's been Polk County and inland areas that have seen the worst of it. So obviously, the further east this storm comes, the more that there's the threat for some wind damage in Polk County. Right now, the models, even the European model, don't quite show. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to go back to the Europe. Being JB, that people are asking about the European and GFS.
And also, you're always welcome to go back to the wall, too, if you need to do any show and tell.
I don't think so. I can do it right here. So this is the model comparison. And the green is the American model, the GFS model, and the red is the European model. And I want to show you what both of the models do beyond just the fact that the American model is further west, but has trended significantly east in its latest update. The European model has stayed steadfast for days. It has been insisting on this particular track. I see JB nodding his head there. Yep. You've seen it every single time. The European has not budged. And
now is the GFS budging?
The GFS is in fact budging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up here because I want to do one thing really quick. Which will help to kind of illustrate the point. Luckily, I have the computer up right here. So
and let me just quickly show the question. Shanna was asking, #HJB, is the GFS catching up with the Euro? And
it is. And that's a great question. It is. But take a look now at the graphic. Let's put it up full if we can. Okay.
Let's go full. Yeah,
well, full? Either way, it doesn't really matter. But notice how the European makes landfall, but both of them, and the GFS comes closest to Pinellas County, but then it starts to move north. And the European does the same thing. It doesn't go far inland. So something is pulling it back north again after it moves inland. So let's say you're in Lakeland or Orlando, for instance. Well, that's good news for you if that turns out to be the case, right? Because the storm doesn't move straight across the state like Charlie did. In fact, a lot of the models show it kind of pulling east and then pulling back north again. Okay, so that I think is an important thing to mention, although we, of course, can't be sure that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, fascinating. Yep. I mean, it really is. And following the GFS and the Euro and also seeing our commenters being so focused on what the GFS and the Euro were doing almost hour by hour, it's been fascinating, of course. Let's get to this one. It just came in from Gene in our comment section, and it is #HeyJB, and it says, let's see here, I'm in Venice, my first storm. What are your thoughts? Let me quickly, before you talk about Venice, I just want to talk about how many new, Floridians that we have in the state, Jeff. There's clearly a lot of folks that have moved here to the Tampa Bay area in the last 2 years. During the pandemic, post-pandemic, a lot of folks who have never been through a storm before, go to WFLA.com. We've got a lot of resources there, but really you just got to be prepared, have your kit ready, know an evacuation strategy. If, of course, the storm is directly going to impact where you are, and also to stay weather aware. We'll keep you posted here on Tracking the Tropics. But as far as Venice, to the commenter, Gene, what do we say?
Right. So, obviously it's less likely that in a place like Venice you would see a direct hit from this. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. You are on the extreme right-hand side of the cone, so you're still in the cone in Venice. But if a storm were to make landfall in Tampa Bay proper, Venice would still experience several feet of storm surge, if not more than that. And that's the unfortunate thing about our coast. It is so susceptible to storm surge. There was a storm in 1993. It was the superstorm, which hit the United States, and it produced like 20-something inches of snow in Birmingham. It wasn't a hurricane, obviously. It was during the wintertime. But that wasn't even a hurricane. It produced 7 feet of storm surge in Pinellas County and about 12 feet of storm surge along the coastline in Hernando County. So if a winter storm can produce that much storm surge, it goes to show you just how vulnerable our coast is. So even places like Venice, you might be a decent distance away from the core of the storm, but you're not totally out of the woods when it comes to storm surge. In fact, it could be fairly substantial even there.
Let's get to this one from Digene in the comment section, and it reads as follows. Again, I'm trying to pluck them out in real time, folks, so you can continue to ask these questions, and we'll just grab them. Digene, #AJB, I heard about Andrew before my time, that it was devastating. Are us here in Pinellas okay? Of course, Pinellas being the westmost county, really, in the Tampa Bay area. Right. So Pinellas, obviously. I mean, I loved your storm surge graphic. I mean, that graphic. Yeah, I can actually. So
why don't I just fast forward to that so you can see?
I had not seen that yet. So that's the perfect way to describe with a 3D model what we're talking about as far as storm surge. Pinellas, Hillsborough. Counties, really, if you're in one of those counties, or if you're not, if you're just in the Tampa Bay area, or if you just like learning about weather.
I think it's this one right here. This is the one you're talking about.
Yep.
Okay, so let's put this in motion. This is Tuesday, and you see the colors, those are wave heights. It's not storm surge, it's wave heights, which are two totally different things. But obviously, the higher your waves, the more roughed up your water is, the better chance you have for big storm surge. So you can see the waves offshore with this storm are 30 to 40 feet, some higher than that, actually. This is the American model. So this is the one that's furthest west. The storm surge would be worse if this was the European model I was showing. But to be on the conservative side right now, I'm showing
this right here, yeah.
I'm showing the American model, right? So the storm, because every storm has a counterclockwise flow. Once the storm is passing us and to our north, it forces in this westerly, southwesterly wind. Now, the reason why I say we are basically the most vulnerable place to storm surge in the United States is because we have this big bay, which has got this big mouth, which can accept all of this water from the Gulf of Mexico. And once the water gets in there, it gets shoved into narrower and narrower cove, and essentially into all the nooks and crannies of the bay. It has nowhere to go, the water. It has to go up. It is its only option, because it's being forced into the bay. It can't evacuate out, at least during the time when there's this west or southwest wind. And so you can see the impacts of that.
And the landmass here, right there with St. Pete and St. Pete, that is Pinellas County.
That's
for those
Pinellas
of you
County
outside
on the left.
Area, so.
But it's not just Pinellas. Yep. It goes way up into Hillsborough. So, in the Pinellas side, it's St. Pete, it's Shore Acres, it's Clearwater on the eastern side, it's Safety Harbor and Oldsmar, and then eastward towards downtown Tampa, McDill, and eastward of there from Ybor City down to Gibsonton, Apollo Beach, Ruskin, so on and so forth.
Let's get to I've not seen this graphic yet, so it's obviously it's extremely. It illustrates.
Well, I made it just now.
Well, that's very nicely done. Very nicely done. To my battery mate here, Jeff Beardelli, chief meteorologist here, WFLA. Lindsay wants to know if you can, not me, I'm not the meteorologist, I'm the guy hitting the buttons. Jeff, if you can explain pressure, because you noted at the beginning of our live stream, and really we were in countdown, and you said, wow, that pressure drop.
Yeah.
So can you explain exactly what that means and why that's significant?
Right. So this is difficult, but I will try to do it the best we can. Essentially, rising air causes thunderstorms to form. Rising air is what causes clouds and rain. So, and you can see that when you walk outside in the summertime in Florida, right? You look up in the sky, and it almost looks like the sky is boiling, right? Those cumulus clouds. Okay. Yep. So we know that rain forms through rising air. The more rising air you have, the more strong a storm could get. It also, because of that rising air, and you don't feel it because it's very subtle, but it actually pushes the atmosphere upward. So it reduces the pressure on your shoulders. Now, high pressure, the opposite of that, right? High pressure crushes the clouds because it's sinking air. And if you really were sensitive, you could feel the high pressure pushing down on your shoulders. So when the pressure falls rapidly and it becomes lower and lower and lower, it means you have a rapidly rising air in the atmosphere. And eventually, this is what happens. Storms start to organize around the center. You get this rapid fall of pressure in the center of the storm, and you end up with this classic hurricane shape. This is a simulated satellite. This is clouds, 60 hours into the future, basically. That's the way it would look Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday evening, which is a very imposing view. But I show this to you because I want you to understand what we're going to be looking at come Tuesday and Wednesday. so that we're prepared just in case it decides to take more of a jog to the east.
And you see there that the bad side, that's a very good explanation. You can see there the dark reds, that is signifying that the bad side of the storm is, again, the east side of the storm. So clearly the Tampa Bay area on the east side. I want to, again, address our commenters. We're getting so many comments about specific towns. And while we could spend a lot of time, talking about specific towns, we're not going to be able to help you at this stage in the process of where we are because, maybe on a county level, we have a better idea as to how Hernando County is going to be versus, let's say, Sarasota County. We have a kind of an inkling there. But even then, there's so much shifting and nudging, wobbling that can exist between now and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So let's remind our audience, there's going to be a lot of live streams this week on whatever app, website, or social media platform that you're watching on right now. And as we get closer to Ian's arrival, we will have a better ability to be able to answer questions about Pinellas Park, about Hudson, about all the towns that I'm seeing in our comment section. I'm seeing them. I'm not ignoring you. It's just because we have to get to questions that we have the best ability to answer at this stage of where we are with Ian. This one is fascinating, though. Cello Bennett wants to know, #KJB, is it better to be in an apartment on the second floor or to be in a one-story home? I'm going to cheat with my response. I'm going to let you respond to this question, but I'm going to respond by just saying the answer is neither. Just get away from the storm. That's the easy way to put it. But if you have to evacuate, you have to evacuate, and you have to have a plan, and you have to make sure that you can get out to an area that is going to be safe for you and your family. But as far as the structures go here,
it's all dependent upon how old the apartment building is. Do you have shutters? Does the home have a new roof? Is it an old roof? Is it secured? So that's all. There's no answer to your question other than to be in the most secure structure that you can be during the storm. So, the building will probably be okay as long as it's not right on the water. And even if it is right on the water, it'll probably be fine. But will the apartments be okay? Are the windows protected? Are there shutters? These are difficult. Second floor is not very high up. And if you're right on the beach and we get 10 feet of storm surge, even the second floor could be potentially have water. And it's not out of the question that parts of the Bay Area, especially closer to where the core hits, could see 10 feet of storm surge. That would not even be close to an exaggeration.
This is why you see so many homes on the beach elevated, and you see them, their first levels off the ground as much as possible. It's for this exact reason and this exact scenario. Amanda Grimes, #KJB. What about flights? I'm in Pittsburgh. I'm supposed to come for a nursing disaster team. Well, thank you for what you do, Amanda. We appreciate it. As far as flights, we're already seeing school cancellations. When are we going to start to see airport impacts, Jeff?
Well, the airport impacts aren't going to happen here until Tuesday.
Right.
What the airlines and airports decide to do, that's beyond my understanding. But we're not going to actually see impacts here until Tuesday. I have a map actually showing that, so let me try to fast forward to it because it tells you kind of exactly what time we expect to see the tropical storm force winds. Just give me a second or two. Actually, sometimes the easier thing for me to do is just kind of roll back here, so just give me a second, everybody.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I'll stay here with you.
I have it right away. It's going to be pretty quick.
I'll stay here with you live, folks, as Jeff kind of cues up the graphics here.
Okay, here we are.
There you go. There it is, right there. And Jeff's back.
So you notice that the onset of tropical storm force winds looks to be Wednesday at 8 a.m. around Venice and Sarasota. See that Wednesday 8 a.m. line?
Yep.
And then there's the Wednesday 8 p.m. line, which has it through places like Newport Richey. So that's for sustained tropical storm force winds. But we would see gusts to tropical storm force in southern parts of our area by as early as Tuesday night. So things would deteriorate gradually during the day on Tuesday. We would begin seeing those squally bands across our area later Tuesday into Tuesday night. And then the onset of what would be true tropical storm force and potentially eventually hurricane force winds would be during the day on Wednesday from south to north across the Bay Area.
This graphic also brings a question to mind that I will ask because it's important. Chances it stalls and just freezes in place.
It's not likely to stall for very long. It could slow down as it's trying to redirect its path northward. As of right now, the models aren't showing a stall. They're showing a brief stall, a slowdown until they can start riding north again. Of course, we don't want them to even slow down. We'd like it to move as fast as possible. But what's going on here, JB, is what's happening here is this. There's this big trough of low pressure in the big dip in the jet stream around the Great Lakes, and so the storm is feeling that pull, but it doesn't make it in time. So the storm is moving north. The jet stream's coming by like this. The storm feels it, starts to move, and then the jet stream flies by and leaves it behind. And now it's got to try to find its way again. I don't know if that was a pretty decent explanation of what's happening here, and I could show it on a graphic too. But it's like, but that's not even set in stone yet. What I mean by that is maybe it will catch its ride. Maybe it will move faster. That's still possible.
We've got to.
Oh, and one more thing I should mention, JB.
Sure.
Because there's because there's a lot of wind shear. Let me show it to you, if I haven't showed it yet. We do really think that this is going to be. Notice how it's a 4 in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and it hits that wall of red, and all of a sudden it becomes a 2.
Well, let me bring this up because I want to bring up this question. Brianna's asking #KJB, what category is it supposed to be when it hits and makes landfall?
That's exactly where I was going. So I'm glad. Thank you for that question, Brianna. So if it hits Sarasota County or Manatee County or even anywhere from Tampa Bay south, it's going to be a major hurricane probably because it's not going to have time to run into that wall of wind shear that you see up there. It's more likely to maintain its major status. If it hits north of that, north of Newport Richey, north of Hernando, Citrus into Cedar Key, or west of that, then it's going to dramatically weaken. So it's likely not to be a major hurricane anymore. It could be a 2, and it's not out of the question for it to be a 1. But remember in Katrina was a 5 when it was over the water for days, and it spun up this tremendous storm surge. It's a huge storm in terms of its girth, and it was very powerful. It brought onshore 28 feet of storm surge because it was so powerful. But when it actually made landfall, it was a 3. It was a very much a weaker hurricane, but it takes a lot more time for the storm surge to go down. So even though it had weakened so much, the storm surge didn't have time to react, and it was still Cat 5 type storm surge. So don't be thrown off guard by, oh, well, it's predicted now to weaken to a 2 or a 1, so it's not going to be a big deal. It's still going to have the storm surge that it built up as a 3 or a 4 over the Gulf of Mexico.
Let's get to this question. Well, let me just explain. There are people that are now watching this from the Panhandle, Jeff.
Yes.
And are now hearing us talk about things shifting a little bit, nudging east. Right. And people are like, "Oh, okay. So wait, is it not? What is going? What they want to know." So Danielle is asking #KJB: is the Panhandle, is Tallahassee, is it good?
Well, those are almost 2 separate questions because most of the Panhandle obviously is west of Tallahassee. Tallahassee, you're still in what is pretty close to the center of the cone. In fact, I can show you that. So we'll show you the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. We're going to get another one, by the way, at 11 o'clock, and I think they are going to shift it a bit further to the east. But there is the forecast track, and Tallahassee is basically just north of St. Mark's, just right around that area. So you're pretty close to the center there. However, Panama City, you're now on the pretty far western side of this cone, and Pensacola, you're out of the cone. Doesn't mean you're not going to experience weather. The storm is big, right? So if it goes straight down the middle, hundreds of miles on either side of the center of the storm, you still experience tropical storm force gusts at least. But so Tallahassee not out of the woods. No one really out of the woods necessarily, but it's coming less likely that this storm is headed towards, let's say, Pensacola.
Let's get to this one from. Hey, can you bring up the spaghettis? Can you bring up the spaghettis for a second?
I can do anything.
Because this question comes up every maybe once or twice a hurricane season, and I want to explain this to our audience. Joni's asking #KJF, why are those 2 models way out west? And I don't know if you can see it on, or can you see it on this graphic? But there's 2 outlier models.
Maybe put it full so we can.
Yeah, let's go full.
Oh, you're talking about the ones on the bottom left?
Yes, that go all the way over the Yucatan.
I'd have to look to see why they are such. Those are the Canadian versions of the Canadian. It's not every Canadian though. You see, it says CEMN and then CEMI, and then if you look in the middle of the track, there's another CMCI. They're just different versions of it, and some of them are just older versions of a Canadian model. But the one I want you to concentrate on right here is the TVCN track, and it's hard to see here, but look at the orange. Mm-hmm. That's the consensus of the models.
Got it.
So that is That's the consensus. That's the average. And if you notice,
The
yesterday,
average of the averages.
and you know, I have one more graphic, which I think maybe it's the next one. So this is really going to help you to see the difference. Can you put this full,
I
JB?
can. I most certainly can. Yep.
All right. So that yesterday, and when everybody was kind of celebrating this shift to the west, and I'll tell you, I was very skeptical of it for sure. It didn't make any sense. You can see those are basically all the models. We call this a super ensemble. So it's basically all the models. Now the models are in the darker shades, the bigger, the thicker lines, and then all their ensembles. So all the children of these models are in the more narrow lines, the thinner lines. You'll notice the heat map there. If you look at where the green and yellow shading is yesterday, it's just south of Panama City, west of Tampa, right? So it's pretty far out in the Gulf of Mexico. Then if you look on the right side, today's models, and this was earlier today, not even these ones that are coming out now, you can clearly see that the heat is shifted very close to the Tampa Bay area and south of St. Mark's. So, JB, can you see that shift? Is it apparent to you?
It is to me.
It's a lot of stuff, I know. And you can also see that today's models are in closer consensus, whereas yesterday they were spread a little bit more. And you can tell that by the blue circle, the blue kind of oval around it, how wide it was yesterday and how less wide it is today. So it shows a meeting of the minds, if you will, and it also shows a shift to the east where the heat, those brighter yellows, are closer to the West Coast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Again, and spaghetti models give us data that help us form a consensus and also shows, too, how the models are in agreement and how they're not in agreement, where exactly they're disagreeing. And usually they are agreeing for a certain point and then they begin to fan out. That's usually how it goes. Jasmine, this is just, we don't really talk about we're always looking ahead.
Yeah,
Whenever we're
right.
talking about the current moment right now. Jasmine, I would love to report that that Tropical Storm Ian is, somewhere on the moon. It is not, unfortunately. It is south of Cuba right now. Let me ask you this question. As we take Jasmine's question as to where Ian is right now, has the turn begun?
Well, it's moving northwest. It's going to move more north. So yes, it's already starting
We
to
can
turn.
see it
You
here.
could see
Yeah.
the past history of it, right? It was moving west, south of Jamaica. That's Jamaica, that little island up there. And then today, a while ago, several hours ago, it started to quickly move northward, northwestward, really, not northward yet. But the next step is that it's going to move more northwest and then eventually northward. So yes, the answer is the turn has begun, and that's where it's located right now. Somebody did ask if it's possible to be a hurricane at 11. I'm going to say probably not, but I don't think we can rule it out considering how fast the pressure has dropped. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
It's an inevitability. It's going to be Hurricane Ian, whether it's tonight, tomorrow morning, lunchtime tomorrow. It's going to change to a hurricane, and that's just because the wind speeds have gone up to Category 1 status on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That's just the way that it works, folks.
And we knew this for 8 days, right, JB? I mean, we've been talking about this for literally, it's amazing to think that our technology has come so far that we could tell you with great confidence that we were going to have a hurricane and a strong one in the Gulf of Mexico in the early part of this week. And sure enough, fast forward 8 to... Now, sometimes we tell you we just don't know. We're not sure where this is going to go. We don't know if it's going to be a threat. This time, we knew with great confidence so that we started ringing the alarm bells literally a week ago. If you've been following us, we've been talking about this for a while. And without hesitation on our part, because this was very well agreed upon and forecast by the models. And by the way, there was nothing there. There was no there. You couldn't even find the clouds associated with what was going to become this disturbance, which was going to become this hurricane. And yet we were able to see this 10 days ahead of time.
Yeah. The models,
amazing.
The models were giving us hints,
very strong hints.
Yeah, very strong hints as to what was going to happen in the future. Let's get this one in here. Kim has been very patient. #HeyJB. Do we need to worry about driving tomorrow?
No, tomorrow's
absolutely not.
Yeah, tomorrow's fine. And even the beginning of, even Tuesday, I would say the first half of the day, you're fine.
How about this one from Shelby?
Even the end of the day.
#HeyJeff. Let's talk about this again. The geographical size of a storm is important.
It is.
And it's not
Very
something
small right now.
It's very small right now. It's compact, right?
Right, but it gets bigger as time goes on. So
How big?
again, so this is, it just depends on which model you believe, right? But let's see if we can make this go.
Well, no,
forward.
but that's see, I don't know this yet. So the GFS has it. Which model has it getting bigger?
The GFS,
larger?
and the reason why it has getting larger because it stays over the water for a longer period of time. So so much of that is controlled by how long it's over the water. Now, of course, the GFS is now closer to the coast, and because of that, it has a little bit less time to get stronger. But it comes on shore before it hits, or it comes close to the coast before it hits all that wind shear in the northern Gulf. So it could come closer to us a little bit stronger. But in answer to your question, we're uncertain as to how big this storm is going to be. It's not going to be the size of Katrina. It's likely not going to be as small as Charlie. So I don't know if you can remember storms and how big they are, but Charlie was a teeny tiny storm which packed a wallop in near its center, but didn't do much outside of like 30 or 40 miles. This storm's going to be bigger than Charlie, but not a monster like Katrina was.
Let's just kind of reset here for our audience in your hurricane headquarters. We are going to do another 10 minutes, roughly 10 minutes. Does that work for you?
Sounds good.
Yeah, 10 minutes answering your questions in our meteorologist Q&A powered by Handyman Roofing here from your hurricane headquarters. We're live at WFLA News Channel 8 with Max Defender 8 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Biradelli joining us in the Stream Center to break down everything that we know about Tropical Storm Ian and to answer your questions live. We're going to continue to do so for the next 10 minutes. I want to talk to our audience about where I'm getting these questions from. We are live on a lot of different Facebook pages, but because it's Sunday night, we don't have an army of people in the newsroom. They're getting some well-deserved rest ahead of what's to come. I am just focused in tonight on the WFLA Facebook page. So if you're on other Facebook pages and you're frustrated, hey, why hasn't JB taken my question yet? If it's not on the WFLA Facebook page, I'm just hyper-focused on that page right now, just trying to get as many questions on screen as possible. And we'll do so next with John. Hashtag HeyJB. When should I decide when to put up shutters in the Oldsmar
That's a great
area?
question.
Yep.
It's a great question. We get that question so often.
Yep.
And it's the perfect question. You should be thinking about that. The answer to the question is you should definitely not be thinking about it until we we pull the trigger. I would say it depends on what kind of shutters you have. I used to own an old house when I lived in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, and I used to have to put the shutters up manually on a ladder because it was an old house, and I had to. If you have automatic shutters,
It's work.
Yeah, if you have automatic shutters, you can do that in less than an hour, right? So I would wait longer. If you have shutters that you have to put up one by one by one with a ladder, then you have to give serious consideration to trying to do that later tomorrow. Okay, but I would not pull the trigger until you hear from me or one of the people on my weather team that you should be doing it because you don't want to waste your time on it. And it really depends on where you are. You're in Oldsmar, so Oldsmar is near the water, and it's also close to the coast, not that far away. So you might want to think about it starting tomorrow if it still looks like this is heading in our general direction, especially if it decides to take that European model track. But again, it really depends upon what kind of shutters you have.
Oh, Chuck, I see your comment. I'm adding this comment to the queue. I have a lot of comments coming up in the queue, but let's just talk about some other areas. Really briefly, Jeff, we've been talking so much about Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
We know that there are other commenters, and we mentioned the Panhandle, but let's talk about two other sections of the state. I'll just get this out of the way. Miami isn't necessarily in the forecast cone right now.
Yeah.
South Florida looks to be okay, but other areas. Let's start with this one from Shanna. Hashtag HJB. What about Northeast Florida? What about Jacksonville? I mean, if it hugs east and goes across the peninsula, Jacksonville could see impacts next weekend.
And it would be probably tropical storm force winds. It would be a weakening storm when it gets to your area. And I don't envision it being a huge impact in terms of wind. But that doesn't mean you'd be out of the woods in terms of tornadoes or heavy rain. I saw one of the. Let me show you this. This will be interesting, and this is more for the Tampa Bay area. But the reason why I'm going to show you it is because I want to show you what the potential is if it were to make a direct impact here.
I'll go full screen here.
Okay, it's going to take me a second to find it. Here it is. Okay, so this is to give you an idea of how much rain is possible. Now, this is the European model, which is much closer to the coast, right? It's actually makes landfall in Tampa. So where you see the pink shading, that's 16 plus inches of rain. Again, this would be if it takes a direct path into or very close to Pinellas County and our coastline. Same thing on the Nature Coast, up to 16 inches of rain. Just offshore, that's 20 to 24 plus inches of rain. Again, so you're asking how much rain is going to be in Jacksonville. Well, you can clearly see from this map right here that it's at least 7+ inches, about as far north as you can see there. So yeah, I mean, rainfall could be a problem for you. Isolated tornadoes, always a problem on the eastern side. I'd be a little less worried about damaging winds in Jacksonville. But yes, power outages, of course. Trees down, yes, of course, it's possible there. But it's a lot less of a worry for Jacksonville, a lot more of a worry for the West Coast.
I see Vanessa's comment. We're gonna add this one to the queue. Let's get to another section of the state. Let's get to Sophie. Hashtag HeyJB. Will the storm go through Orlando, or is there a chance it goes through Orlando?
There is some chance. There is some chance. The latest European model and even the American model shows it moving northeast. The European model actually shows it making landfall in the Tampa Bay area and then curving directly north and just kind of like paralleling US 19 up on the Nature Coast is basically what it shows. Maybe just further inland than that, maybe the Sun Coast. So the models have kind of shied away from showing it cutting straight across like Charlie did. So at the moment, at least, it seems more likely that it would take more of a northerly track if it were to come on shore. That doesn't mean we can rule out Orlando, but it seems more likely to be north of Orlando. But again, that genuinely could change. And we remember Hurricane Charlie to the last minute looked like it was coming through the Tampa Bay area. And then all it did was shift its angle a couple of degrees, and it took it south 50 miles. And that's the way that our coastline is set up. All you have to do is all it has to be is a slight shift like that, and all of a sudden it's a completely different part of the coast.
That's why those wobbles can be extremely important to monitor. Billy, hashtag JB, when will we start feeling the impact in Tampa? Now, of course, the worst of the storm is close to the eye, but those outer bands, the earliest that we're going to start to see gray skies and rain start to hit the Tampa?
Later Tuesday, but this graphic, actually, the one that's up right now, shows the arrival of tropical storm force winds. It's Wednesday morning, Manatee County, Sarasota County, and it's Wednesday evening on the Nature Coast, which means it's Wednesday afternoon. This would be kind of solid tropical storm force winds, not just those, infrequent gusts that, you get a squall that comes by, you get a gust, and then you're okay for 3 hours. This is more the prominent, robust and sustained tropical storm force winds. We get into the southern part of the Bay Area Wednesday morning, northern part of the Bay Area Wednesday afternoon and evening.
Then let's just get to this. Again, Vanessa, when can we expect the worst of this storm to hit us? Now, look, speed of this system can still change and likely will change. There's going to be some shift as far as the storm's arrival. But right now, the worst, Tampa Bay, is what exactly?
The worst of it looks to be on, I'd say, Wednesday, starting in the afternoon through Wednesday night.
Okay. We've got another couple of comments. I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a second. Can I put you on the spot for a minute?
Sure.
Yeah, Jeff's cool. We're gonna put Jeff on the spot a little bit with Shay and KK. Shay, hashtag HeyJB, from the start of Ian, which model has been the most accurate? And then we're gonna go from Shay to, I'm not kidding, it's KK. Hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJeff. Which model would you say is the most accurate? So yes, putting you on the spot. GFS, Euro. What are we talking about here?
The Euro. Euro has been the most accurate. The Euro showed kind of slower development today. And I don't think anyone really believed it. Everybody was kind of like, why is the European model so weak for so long? Why isn't it showing rapid intensification right away? Turned out it was right. What happened is it needed to reorganize itself. We knew that conditions were perfect for it to develop. It should have happened last night or this morning. We should have seen it intensifying much quicker, much earlier. That's what most people thought, meteorologists. It seemed a little curious as to why the European model was so slow in developing it. Well, the European model turned out to be right, and as a result of that, partly, the storm is going further east. Which is, I think, why the other models are starting to react to what the European model's been saying for so long. So it's not only a function of the steering in the Great Lakes and the eastern part of the country, it's a function of the inner workings and inner mechanics of the storm's organization and what kind of winds it follows, right? If a storm is weak, then the thunderstorms are not very high in the atmosphere, so it gets steered by the low-level winds. When the storm gets really strong, it taps into the upper levels where the wind's from a different direction. Well, the European got it right. Said, no, this is not going to be a fast developing storm today. So because of that, it's going to go further east, and that's exactly what has been happening.
I'm getting a T-shirt that says "Trust the Euro." I'm just gonna get that T-shirt. I think
Well,
we need the T-shirt.
Years ago, you would have been right 99% of the time, but lately the American model's given it a run for its money. Although so far in this storm, the Europeans have been better. We don't know. Maybe that won't continue.
Another few minutes here on Track in the Tropics, our Sunday night edition, powered by Handyman Roofing. Amanda, hashtag Hey Jeff, should I cut down my trees in the front yard?
Well, I don't know where you are, Amanda, but I would say that if you think you're going to be in the path of the storm, maybe a good idea, if you can do it and safely. Do it before it starts getting windy, obviously. And if you can do it safely, it might be a good idea. It may not be easy to get tree pruning tomorrow, considering everybody else is going to be trying to do the same thing. But if you can do it and you can do it safely, I would say it might not be a bad idea if you think you're going to be near the strong winds.
I love how sometimes we get words of wisdom, not even just a question, just words of wisdom from, I can just tell, Floridians who have been through storms before in our comment section. We've got June Ann Moss, hashtag KJB, and I want to know if you agree with June Ann here, Jeff. She says, storms like these are such a game of endurance. Wait and see.
Yeah, I got it. So I was in South Florida as a chief meteorologist many years ago when both Matthew hit and when Irma hit. And both of those times, it looked like the center of the cone was pointed directly at Miami, directly at Fort Lauderdale, directly at West Palm Beach. And what a disaster that would have been. And I have to tell you, even as a meteorologist, and one of my fellow meteorologists used to call me catatonic in terms of my emotions, because I'm not a very emotional person, so I don't get worried. But I will tell you, when I saw those two storms pointed directly at I-95 and right up the coast, it was a little scary there. But lo and behold, at the last minute, within 24 to 48 hours, the storm veered off in a different direction. So what I always say is, but I felt better about it because I prepared ahead of time. My wife knew what she was supposed to do. We had what we needed to have ready in case we needed to go. And then I felt better about the situation. And yes, it veered off, and it's annoying to get all your stuff together and spend all that money and all that time. But in the end, it's better because if in fact it does come your way, you're ready to go. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think that this is a good opportunity for us then to talk about how important it is to, especially for new Floridians or the folks that are new to the Tampa Bay area, to not be panicking, to not be highly stressed, because it's important to be prepared and to be weather aware. But you want to be in the right frame of mind, and you want to be. The better that you are up here, the more safe that you and your family are going to be. So it's just so important that we're reminding our audience that while it's important to stay prepared and it's important to stay weather aware, it's also important to just not panic when a storm is, the storm is still south of Cuba at this point in time.
But even if it comes directly at us, one thing I can promise you is you're going to be fine as long as you listen to me and as long as you listen to us. You're going to be just fine. You're going to be safe. And as long as you take the precautions you need to. It's as simple as that. It really is. Where I worry just a little bit more is what happens afterward, right? Because it becomes really inconvenient and really stressful when some people are without power for days, if not weeks. And I can tell you that on a track that some of the models are painting for us, some of us could be without power for days or weeks, right? So it's a little early to know who it's going to be and if it's really going to be weeks or days. But that's, to me, the toughest thing. So you need to have the supplies you need to get through a week, the water you need, the first aid that you need, the food that you need, because if truly it is a direct hit, power lines are down, trees are down, it's hard to get places. You don't have power. You may not have water that you'll likely have water, but you may have water that you need to boil. You may not be able to boil it. It becomes complicated in many ways. You may not have air conditioning. So what I say is you're going to be just fine if you just listen to what I say and what we say here at WFLA. You're going to be okay. It's what happens afterward and it was the viewer that just said endurance. It's not just endurance up to the storm.
Yep.
It's especially endurance after the storm.
And as we're talking about after the storm, it's important to remind our audience that things have changed technology-wise over the decades, and you can stay connected if you lose power, because if you have mobile batteries and you're able to get a cellular signal, you can watch us here on Tracking the Tropics. And we don't just, after a storm is done, we don't just, pack it up and go home. we stay with you live to talk about things like where supplies might be and where you can go and when you could expect power back in certain areas of the impact area. So it's important that you have your phone charged, that you also, of course, have your mobile batteries charged, because we will be here with you in the palm of your hand. You might not have access to broadcast television, you might not have access to WFLA, but you have access to us here in the palm of your hand.